Good evening. I'm Dr. Gregory A. Salters. Welcome as we begin our continued discussion on what it is that we can do dealing with law enforcement in our community while we're tying these bridges, building connections, because as everything is going on in our community, we're definitely going to still have law enforcement. We're going to have our educators that are out there and our community. And we definitely need to work closer together so that we can, one, get down crime, and two, the fear of crime. There are numerous benefits for that. One of the things for getting down crime is that helps our property values. It helps us overall when we're dealing with also the fear of crime and you're having a safe neighborhood. And what's been happening sometimes when you look across America and you look across the world, we're looking at how law enforcement is interacting with the community. And sometimes the community wonders, how do we identify, or how do we make a complaint, or how do we get bad officers off of the force? Sometimes individuals say law enforcement can't police themselves. To a certain extent, I definitely agree with that. And that's why I want to talk with you all this evening about what we can do to address individuals that are in our profession that perhaps either need additional training, perhaps need to apply the training they have received, or do not need to be in our profession. Because contrary to popular belief, those of us that are in law enforcement, that are doing our job, that are working hard, you have heard us and you see how I titled this. A bad cop is a good cop's worst enemy. Because many times it only takes one bad apple to spoil the bunch, and we definitely don't need any bad apples in this particular bunch. So let's start talking about things. In previous talks, we've talked about what is a good cop, what is an outstanding cop, how do we recruit law enforcement officers, how does our community become engaged so that we make sure that we have the right officers within our community. Also, we have to look at it. We need to start or improve our connections between the community and law enforcement, because sometimes having stronger connections helps us address the issues a lot better. It's just like being in a relationship with someone. Perhaps you have communicated with individuals, but you have not connected with them. There's a book out there by John C. Maxwell, Everybody Communicates, Few Connect. We need to connect from a law enforcement perspective. We need to connect more with our community. And from a community perspective, we need to, as a community, become more engaged with our police department and our schools. All of that can help us improve. Now, when we're talking about instances of service that you receive from law enforcement, let's look at the type of services you may receive. You can come in contact with law enforcement for any numerous reasons. It could be that you just were out and you saw them when you were having a meal. You could have seen a cop out there, a law enforcement professional, and you just had casual conversation. You could have had an encounter with law enforcement from a traffic stop. You could have been driving and could have been stopped. You also could have contact from law enforcement from being a victim of a crime. You could have been, your home could have been burglarized, your car burglarized, some of your property stolen, or anything. You could have had it all the way up to, and perhaps with law enforcement officers, we deal with issues dealing with all the way up to the most heinous crimes that you can imagine. We have had to deal with those. So we as law enforcement professionals are involved in many areas of life in our community. We have to connect with our community, and we have to see what type of services they provide. And one of the times when we're dealing with the level of service that we provide, it helps when we both understand each other, because both of us must be culturally competent to deal with the other. From a law enforcement standpoint, we must be culturally competent to deal with the various communities in which we police. It's not that we give one different respect, but you must at least be aware of little cultural norms that can cause more issues than none. It's just like when our federal employees or the presidents travel, they go through cultural classes so they are aware of the cultural norms in the areas in which they're going. So you may have different things that go in certain communities. It can be as simple as, in some communities or some individuals would want you to call them ma'am or sir, and others would prefer that you don't call them ma'am or sir. And sometimes you have to err on the side of respect, and sometimes you have to ask individuals what they would like to be referred to. So we deal with that. Then also sometimes when we're out there and we're dealing with things, and it's not an excuse from a law enforcement standpoint, sometimes when we go out there, we are dealing with so many things after each other. Sometimes we may not be as warm or friendly as you may have expected. So sometimes that can just be a conversation and we talk. But sometimes I've had it where individuals have been on traffic stops and they have been stopped by the police, or they have had an encounter with police. They do not like what the police are doing and they become tremendously upset. And sometimes I can definitely agree with how they're upset. But what we have to remember to do is when we're out there on the scene with law enforcement officers, what you should do at that time is, as best as you can, remain calm, comply with what the officer is asking. And if the situation is of such, please, you may go ahead and you may ask for a supervisor to respond to the scene. Depending on the situation, depending on officer safety, depending on the totality of the situation, the supervisor can respond out there. Perhaps they will meet you when you get to the station or provide you with contact information to follow up with you on this incident. The main thing that I want us to do is the time to have a discussion or to express your displeasure with law enforcement. The best time is not during the heat of the incident. The best time is afterwards. And then after you have cleared from this incident, what you may wish to do at that time, you can contact the supervisor. Also, I like to tell individuals to document your efforts. So you may wish to send an email to the chief of police or the sheriff, to the city manager, or you may also send an email or correspondence to internal affairs or professional compliance to make sure that your issue is looked at appropriately. And some individuals do not feel comfortable doing any of that for whatever reason, because their lived experiences, because they may not have developed a sense of trust in that process. So some individuals may reach out to people they're familiar with in the community. They may reach out to their church. They may reach out to civic organizations. Just this evening, I spoke with individuals with the NAACP regarding an issue. So a lot of times you can reach out to those individuals that can help you move your case forward, to make sure it has the proper hearing, to make sure it's looked at appropriately. And once it's looked at appropriately, then the administration will then begin to look at it and determine what are the results of it. What did the investigation reveal? And sometimes I've had it to where when both sides have sat down and talked about it, sometimes it has been a misunderstanding. Sometimes it has been something that was perhaps a rudeness. Perhaps we may have officers that have gotten repeated similar complaints. And that's why I tell people, if something occurs, regardless of what's happened before, please notify us as a police department, because we can only do things once we're notified of them, and let us try to deal with them. And sometimes we've dealt with issues and they come to us and we're like, wow, this is really, I'm glad you told us about this. We can investigate that and deal with the officer on this particular deal. And sometimes I've had them to where individuals have come in and the complainant has not, their story did not pan out as to what they stated. We were able to get some other facts and were able to let them know that what you stated, we were unable to substantiate. And it's kind of interesting. I've even seen some where the body worn cameras have actually documented what has happened. And the document that comes up has contradicted some of the statements that have been made by some individuals. But what we're wanting to do is make sure that we know as a profession, and we want the community to know, that we need you to work with us to identify issues that where the law enforcement officers may have not provided you the type of services that you wish to provide. And this is an interesting one, because when we talk about meeting and closing gaps and getting to know each other, it's really kind of interesting when I've talked to individuals and we have had similar situations where officers have not done what the complainant thought should have been done. When we've talked to it, sometimes I've told them, I understand exactly how you feel. I can understand that. I felt the same way when I got pulled over by law enforcement and they gave me an explanation of why I didn't turn my signal light on, and they were giving me all these explanations and gave me a ticket. I understood I understood exactly how the complainant felt. And then what I found out was after we had a conversation, we both could understand both sides of the story. It wasn't like we agreed on it and we liked the tickets, but at least we came to some understanding as to what happens. Now, that's on a very minor level. Now, when you get up to the level of the amount of force that officers use, the use of force, then of course that's even going to be a deeper investigation. You may have any type of allegation against law enforcement officers where we did anything that was wrong. This is what we want to address. And these are one of the things that I deal with officers when we're out there working very hard and we're doing what we're supposed to do and we're serving the public and doing our best. And someone that is among us is doing something that is less than professional and it can create issues. That is our worst nightmare. Because it's what happens in many groups. That group, we get painted with a broad brush. And being an African-American male, I am very familiar with being painted with a broad brush and how stereotypes work. And we must be kind of careful when we're out here and we're painting everyone with broad brushes. We must be specific and deal with the individual and the actions that they do. And we take that into consideration when we're actually making our allegations. Because what we as in law enforcement are doing, we're definitely trying to make sure that our officers are acting professional. We're wanting to go out and serve the community to give them everything that they deserve. We're looking to get down crime. And for us to get down crime, we must have the help of the community. We cannot get down crime and improve the quality of life in our communities without the public. One of the classes, you may have heard some of the classes that are coming out. I encourage you to Google some of these things because these are some of the classes that are being taught in law enforcement agencies. I'm currently teaching a class called Procedural Justice and the Art of Communication, where we talk about procedural justice and how we go out there and let the public know how we're wanting to treat the public and also inside our agency what we're doing. Because it has the tenets. We're wanting to be fair. We're wanting to be impartial. We're wanting to get the voice of individuals out there and fairness. We're wanting to do those things. So fair, impartial, we want to be transparent, and we want to give the voice to individuals out there. And that's procedural justice. You all can Google that. You could shoot me an email or you could put it in the contacts, whatever it is that we would like so that we can address some of these issues. These are the things that we're really looking to do and what we're looking to address. You also have heard some classes that have been talking about implicit bias. And when we're talking about the implicit bias, sometimes that comes into just based on who we are. We all have biases. Everyone has biases. And what I tell individuals, most of the time when we hear implicit bias, we think about it from a race or ethnicity or cultural standpoint. But everyone has an implicit bias. If people, when you look at it and people say that law enforcement officers can't police themselves, what they're basically saying is that in some cases is that because we are in law enforcement or because I'm in law enforcement, I have an implicit bias towards law enforcement and whatever it is that they are doing. So others are like, no, that's not quite what we mean. And you also talk about blind spots because when we go through the training, you begin to look at areas that you may not have thought about and say, wow, I hadn't really thought about that. And so let me look at this from another person's standpoint. And I see we have a few of our individuals with us. I see Tina Johnson. Thank you for joining me. I see Selena Hightower. Thank you. I see Anisha. Got some good information over here. I see Alex Jordan has joined us. See some others that are there. I see Claudel. And many of these are corrections and law enforcement professionals that we have out here that are joining us. And if y'all have things that y'all would like for me to address, please just type them in the comments. I'll get those and we can kind of discuss some things dealing with what our worst enemy is as a good cop, good law enforcement professional, regardless of where you work in the profession. What is it that we're looking at? Then also another class that we're looking at is when I talk about the art of connecting. How many of us are really looked at, and I talk about it sometimes when we're doing these lives, is when you see individuals commenting that you don't know, do you connect with them if we're resonating and discussing some of the same issues? This is how we build our network and we connect. Because I may have an issue that I'm dealing with at my agency, but if I've looked on my social media and I've looked out here and I've connected on my things, I may be able to pick up the phone and call someone at another agency, inbox them at another agency, and get some insight. Because this is one of the things that you look at from law enforcement, many agencies, in an effort to get information from the public as we are wanting to move forward and improve our transparency. Many law enforcement agencies have even moved their internal affairs or professional compliance unit away from the police department so that we can get the individuals that wish to make the complaints or have concerns don't have to walk into the police department. We've also, when you look at it, the body worn cameras, adding to our transparency. Many agencies have the body worn cameras. And one of the things with the body worn cameras that many people may not realize is that the body worn cameras has really helped us in law enforcement. The law enforcement professionals I work with love the body worn cameras. They provide a video of what it is that they're seeing. Now, this isn't 100% anything. There is no silver bullet, if you will, or one particular thing that's going to guarantee that every single person in law enforcement is going to be the most outstanding law enforcement professional, just like there is no silver bullet that's going to make sure everybody in society is going to be tremendously upstanding and no one is ever going to break the law. But when we begin to put things in to show that we are dealing with transparency issues, we're dealing with accountability issues, we're putting in the training to help our officers be as professional as we possibly can, we're working to bridge gaps in communities. I would love for you all to offer the law enforcement officers invitations to come into your organizations, to come in and talk to your organization so that we can build some of these relationships. And many times it's those conversations that we have that allows us to even address some issues that we may not even have known about. I see Nadia, I say thank you for joining us. Eric Truyo, I see you out there. Thanks. I know that with all this COVID stuff going on, Eric will be soon getting back over there to Crave and your bands and that type stuff. And Melissa, I know you'll be on tomorrow night. Everybody should turn into Melissa Jane, where she'll be talking about the social media stuff. She puts on a lot of things, and she really is educating the community. Tina, let's see what we have here. Tina Johnson, please address implicit bias as it relates to Black leaders engaging in complicit. Oh, wow, Tina. You're going to make me go to the scholarly voice. So when we're discussing implicit bias as it relates to Black leaders engaging in complicit conduct against Black employees, I guess this is the same thing to where we're dealing with it and you're talking about it, Black and the complicit conduct. You all may have heard it in the sense to where the oppressed becomes the oppressor. So that means that if you have been held down for so long, once you get into a certain position, you begin to return that same feeling or oppression to individuals that are coming from where you come from. I've heard this when Blacks have supervised Blacks. I've heard it when it's been ladies in charge of other ladies and other minority groups that have been out there. And then sometimes we can look at it to where we turn a blind eye to things, trying to say that we're unaware of them. Again, that's why I say we must connect with individuals and how things are going. And Atina, as you know, you and I connected when you were in the police academy. So we connected from the police academy and have been able to have that connection going through. But those are some things that we must take into consideration and be aware of as leaders and make sure that we don't have our blind spots on to where we are not addressing individuals that are in our same camp. And we also must not do as they state with that scholarly thing where the oppressed now becomes the oppressor. So when we're dealing with that, we're not dealing with a bad police officer. We can be dealing with someone that is a leader that is not doing what a leader could do. Because remember, a leader, according to John C. Maxwell, leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And when you're in a leadership position, if you're in a leadership position and you hear individuals stating that I respect the position and not the individual, that's where we're dealing with positional power as opposed to personal power. And we want to make sure that as a leader, we want to develop that personal power, which you gain by connecting with individuals, organizations, and the community. So therefore, your rank or title is not what they're respecting. They're respecting you as an individual. So Atina, thank you for that question. Any others that we have? Okay. Wow. Okay. Selena, We have you and another one of the outstanding law enforcement executives, and she's also a member of Noble. One of the things, the slippery slope, supervisors, command staff not addressing minor issues of officers that eventually lead to major issues and misconduct of officers. Hashtag bad cops. I do understand that. And it's kind of interesting when you talk about that slippery slope, because it's kind of like individual state. When I teach ethics also, and you get on that thing, as you say, the slippery slope, and you begin kind of like with the era of omission. So you don't write down that officer so-and-so did X. You just leave that out. You omit that from your report or omit that from writing up. And then as you begin to say, okay, you can't say I lied, I left that out. Then they begin to see how that becomes a slippery slope with them. So they begin by not putting it in. Then the next time they'll put in a little bit, and it continues to go until they get to a certain level. And statistics will show that normally when you're getting on that slippery slope, you start out probably within your second or third year of being on the slippery slope. But you'll notice that when you review the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission and your reports that come out from your various states and some from your Department of Justice, that some of the individuals that are disciplined, it begins to happen between the 5 and 10 year mark of individuals' careers, because they've been there through the rookie time. They think they have gotten things figured out, and that's when you might start noticing some of the shortcuts that are becoming. And it really depends on the study that you look at as depending on which particular time frame comes in. But those slippery slopes definitely come in. So we need to make sure that we address those small things before they snowball into something that is really out of control. We need to deal with that. So I greatly appreciate that question, Selena. Let's see what else we have here. Any others that we have? Got that one. Yes, indeed, Eric and the Jazzers. And then Dr. Ernest Burt down there with Miami-Dade. One of the things that you talk about, community, is definitely important. One of the things I'd like to also take this opportunity to do is, how do we define community? Because when you're going back 20 or 30 years ago, community used to be the area in which you lived and said, this is my community. But right now, I think that we can agree the definition of community has definitely changed, because as we're on here now and we're going live, the community that we have are the individuals that are watching us, connected with us, and the World Wide Web has really expanded the notion of community. So right now, when you talk about community is definitely important, Dr. Burt, when you're talking about it now, any and everybody that watches this is now being informed on what we deal with and being let known that a bad cop is a good cop's worst enemy. So right now, for those that are in law enforcement, I'm trying to think what we could do as a hashtag. I saw Lieutenant Hightower Selena put over there hashtag bad cops. So I don't want that to be trending, hashtag bad cops. So why don't we put hashtag good cops? So if you agree with that, a bad cop is a good cop's worst enemy, put down that hashtag good cops, because that's what we're trying to do. And we're good cops trying to become better cops so that we can improve our community, because that's what it's all about. So then, okay. And then Alex Jordan, here you are again, another good, outstanding Alpha brother. It's important to document. That is one of the biggest things that I have noticed. Individuals have come up to me and said, this cop is bad. But then when you go and you look in individuals' personnel files, you talk to the community and you ask, how come you have not sent us an email? How come you have not told us? Because how can I act on something that I'm unaware of? So what we want you to do is, if you have those things that are out there, let us know, so that at least we as an organization and as a profession can at least look into the situation to see what exactly is going on. It may be a misunderstanding. It may be someone that needs training. It may be someone that needs to apply the training that they had, or it may be someone that does not need to be in our profession. But again, the community is here. We need to be working with you, because as a good cop, we do not want bad cops in our profession. It is bad enough out there doing this. When you look at it right now with everything that's going on in law enforcement, The white officers that I have that are very professional, they do not want to be painted as racist. The brown and black officers that are out there, they don't want to be tainted with tickets and or arrest. And if we're doing that, who will we have that is policing our communities? So we want to make sure we can remove the bad cops, recruit, retain, and promote the outstanding cops so that we can move our community forward. Those are some of the things we really need to do, and we need your help to do that. Okay. There, okay, Zimbalist Chalk. Now, this is the brother, another good alpha brother from Louisiana, and that is the one that talked to me and recruited me into law enforcement. So are the PD looking at all the First Amendments and making changes? I see these videos all the time, and these officers overstep and violate citizen rights. What you're looking at right there, Chalk, is that yes, agencies are looking at it. And yes, as you realize, there is a definite slippery slope there dealing with First Amendment of officers and what they can and can't say. If we have any legal individuals that are out there that would like to discuss that or put that in the chat, any of our attorneys that may be out there, if you all have any, see if you could text them to get them to come on and talk to us about that. I'd greatly appreciate it. And then the other one, what we have, another one out here, it is Jumorrow. Okay, Jumorrow. All righty. And Jumorrow, tell your son happy birthday. Also, what is law enforcement's definition of community policing? Law enforcement's definition of community policing, I'm teaching a course, and if you look at community policing, you'll see that it has 3 pillars. The pillars of community policing would be partnerships, problem solving, and organizational transformation. So when you look at it from a partnerships, problem solving, and organizational transformation. So when you look at that first pillar of partnerships, that is very broad. I like to look at that as partnerships, just as we do with you dealing with the human trafficking, so that we can deal with that. So if there's anyone that has any issues, concerns, or whatever dealing with human trafficking, Jumorrow is definitely the lady to talk to about that. She is our resident expert on human trafficking. And so when we're looking at the partnerships that are happening in the community within organizations, that's out there. When you're looking at problem solving, that's talking to all sides to, one, define the problem. So once we define the problem, we begin putting things in place to address the problem. And then the other one is the organizational transformation. So that transformation is what takes place when you look at things. They may not be going as you would like them to do, but you begin to transform the organization into the way that it needs to be to address the issues that the community has provided. Hopefully that's the definition you were looking for. I have another one here. Alex Jordan, Selena comment goes back to leadership, not having blinders on, most definitely. And sometimes those blinders, when we talk about blinders, we need to find out whether they are conscious or unconscious, because sometimes things are unconscious, meaning you are unaware of those biases or blinders. That's where you talk about your blind spots. That's why we have classes, we have interaction, we communicate with each other, we connect with each other, so that therefore we can perhaps identify any blinders or blind spots we may have so that we can better address the issues. Okay, Chalk, you also have yes, but more are afraid of the blue line and coming to work to see them again and not getting those details and extra money, all about the dollars and being liked. If I understand what you're saying, sometimes individuals within the agency may not be so quick to identify other officers because of the monetary impact it could have on them. Perhaps that officer was controlling the overtime details. Perhaps they were controlling details. So therefore, the individuals do not wish to jeopardize that. I had not thought about that, but I can see where that could be an issue. Always follow the dollars. And these are some of the things that we have to put in place and see how do we address them. And if we really engage our community, it's just like when we're conducting investigations in the community and we have our confidential informants and we have individuals that are out there. If we fully engage the community, we should have more than 1 or 2 individuals that will identify a problem and being able to report that to the proper chain of command or organization so that those issues can be addressed. Okay, Jumorrow, the Black community has experienced years of trauma due to racism and police brutality, so it is reasonable to expect blocked trust from the community. Yes, that's where some individuals out there in the mental health field are talking about trauma-informed care. So what we're doing is realizing the trauma and realizing what's been occurring and when addressing these particular issues. And also, if you look at some of the research that's out there, they're beginning to identify what's been going on dealing with racial bias and the trauma that the minority community has been going through over generations. And they're beginning to even use it as an analogy and trying to also look at it as stating that that is post-traumatic stress syndrome based on the impact it's having on individuals' health. And now, because chronic trauma produces and creates blocked trust, are law enforcement officers knowledgeable, aware, and trained on trauma-informed care? If not, is this something agencies need to add to their training curriculums? I believe that there are some agencies that may be adding the trauma-informed care into their curriculums. And also, again, that's dealing with our community and also dealing with your officers that are good officers and outstanding officers. It's just like when we were in college, there were some classes that we attended on our own because we wanted to deal with them. So sometimes by having conversations like this tonight, we can begin identifying some of the law enforcement executives that are on here and some officers that may be more interested in the trauma-informed care so that we can better move forward. And some of the tenets that you looked at over in the trauma-informed care, when you're saying, are we doing that? I also know that when we have been investigating crimes, particularly when they have been sensitive crimes, and those in the area that you deal with, Jumorrow, dealing with some of the sexual trafficking, some may be even child abuse, some may be even domestic violence, you'll notice that we have even begun bringing in pets and have the dogs and that type thing to help comfort and help the victims relax so that they can work with us so that we can definitely find out what took place and increase the impact of our investigation. So I appreciate that input. Then again, I got Dr. Burt here, or is Dr. Burt. What community engagement efforts do you find to be effective as it relates to improving law enforcement and citizen relationships? And is this area hindered by budget cuts that may exist? Some of the community engagement efforts that we do is, one, no matter what we do, we have to be intentional about our efforts. So sometimes people just say things and are not very intentional about it. Also, when we begin having the classes, just as Jumorrow asked, what is community policing? When you have the class and you begin to see the pillars of community policing and you begin to say partnerships, now when I say partnerships and I'm talking about community engagement, I begin to say now this is community engagement. This is what we're dealing with partnerships. Some of those community engagements are not monetary. However, when you're looking at the time that it takes to engage a community, to engage in activities, and if I were coming to your business and it were burglarized and I come in and I just take the burglary and I leave, that does not take as much time as coming in, handling the burglary, talking to you, finding out a little bit more about you, finding out a little bit more about your business. Then that would take more time. So that could be a budgetary issue dealing with how much time is spent on each call. So therefore, it was Dr. Smith Boff, when she was in a meeting with me, she was asking, is community engagement and community-oriented policing a unit within an agency, or is it an overall agency philosophy? So therefore, we have to begin looking at our agencies and saying, is this something that our entire agency is doing, or is this something that we're doing as a unit within an agency? So thanks a lot, Dr. Burt. And then here we are. Then we have Jumorrow. Well, I have an agency that does a wonderful job if you're interested. Which agency are you referring to, Jumorrow? If you could just drop that in the chat, because I know you're doing some wonderful things over at the state attorney's office. Let us know, because the individuals that are watching this, they definitely need to know where the resources are. And I would rather be a river than a reservoir. So if we have information that's out there that will help others, let's drop it in this chat and share it with each other so that we can all help our community move forward, because this is a community that we are having right here now. So we want to make sure we have this. Make sure I haven't left anyone else's definitions or questions out. Okay. Okay. Tina, please address how police leaders can better address issues of racial disparity internally. Now, this is one interesting thing. When you talk about racial disparity and I talk about equity, I want to make sure, and I do not want to get confused. Representation is definitely very important in all issues. But what I don't want to get confused with is many times organizations define diversity as a picture on the wall and saying they have a few white, they got some browns, and they have blacks. But what I will submit with you, just because of a person's skin tone does not really denote their mind or their culture or what their lived experiences have been. I can tell you that many times my career has been hampered by those that look like me and helped by those that didn't look like me. So I don't want us to get caught in talking about diversity from a picture on a wall. So what I like for us to look at is we talk about and we value each other. We look at what everyone has to bring to the table. So when you're talking about issues of racial disparity internally, what are we doing? Do we see that there is a disparity between any type of demographic? Are we trying to prepare that demographic for the opportunities? Are we recognizing that? Also, I've seen it sometimes where individuals may look and see that we don't have a certain demographic. And I've had individuals tell me years back that we don't need to advertise for these positions in law enforcement because they're so great, individuals should be coming to them. But I will tell you, if it were not for Zimbalist Chalk and some others telling me about the opportunities within law enforcement, I would not have known about it. So what I want us to do as a community, begin, Google the law enforcement agencies in your area. I want you to look at the jobs that they have in those areas. We have jobs that are far exceeding just the sworn positions. We have civilian positions in everything. Can you imagine if your community went out and made a concerted effort to recruit and hire individuals within your agency where most of the individuals in your agency lived in the community? Would that change how connected you are in the community? Would that change how we address some of these racial disparities? And the racial disparities could be mirroring the community in which we live. These are some things that we need to do. Operate this as you would a business. What are we doing to help that? What is the community doing to help us get outstanding officers so therefore we can weed out the others? When you look at it right now, all of the people I see on here that work at law enforcement agencies, I believe each one of those agencies are understaffed or has vacancies. What are we doing to fill those vacancies with outstanding good cops and making sure the bad cops are out? Let me make sure I've addressed all of our questions that we have here. Okay. All righty, Jumorrow, you say Sunshine Health does an amazing trauma-informed care training and you use them for all your trainings. So individuals that are out there, that's there. And Jumorrow, I will ask you if you could go ahead and drop their link in the contacts if you would be so inclined. So therefore the individuals could have their link to look and see what they're having. And this is what we're doing. So now look at what we're doing right now. We could have some individuals that are outstanding cops, but are going through something. So they could be having trauma and they are doing their job because they haven't dealt with the trauma they've had in their life. And so therefore they're being labeled as a bad cop. But by coming to this community, we're finding some resources for them. So here it is, some trauma-informed care. We go out there, deal with the training, and perhaps we need to have that internally. Also, when you look at it at my agency, we have also hired a psychologist. I believe we're one of the few law enforcement agencies that's hired a psychologist for our officers and their families to address these issues so that we're dealing with the mental health of the officers. Again, that can cause an officer to be labeled bad, but what are we doing as a community and as an organization to treat the symptom as opposed, or treat the issue as opposed to treating the symptom? We need to get to the root cause of the issue of these individuals. This is what we're looking for. What else do we have there? This one, how do you give Black and brown youth in our underserved communities a more positive definition of policing, law enforcement, what it really means to protect and serve? Many times you look at it. That's why I love the time that I taught DARE, drug abuse resistance education. I taught it for 4 years at 7 different schools. You look at it right now, you find that my agency, our community engagement team, will be out there doing things in the community. You have your school resource officers. I just saw Lieutenant Hightower down there with Hollywood Police Department dealing with the shop with the cop and having things out there. Fort Lauderdale is done. I know many law enforcement agencies are out there doing the shop with a cop. They're out there in the schools. They're in the parks. You have your various police athletic leagues. All of these things are being combined to really show what the good cops are doing and how we're interacting with our community to address those issues. Thanks again for that one. How do you handle bad cops? A lot of times, one, we start out by identifying the behavior, because I'm one of those that I believe the person isn't bad, but what they are doing could be less than stellar. So we begin looking at what's less than stellar. We begin to investigate it to make sure it is there. And based on the investigation, we go out there. You have the different things, the levels of discipline, progressive discipline. You work with the unions to address that, because that also helps the unions when we can address the bad cops, because the same thing with the union. The union does not want bad cops in our profession either. So we must get these partnerships to going. This is how we move forward and go. Okay. We have, Dr. Telesco, Grace Telesco. Thank you for joining us tonight. She's over at Nova Southeastern University dealing with the criminal justice and has some outstanding programs. So that's another one that you all have, another person in our community that we can definitely deal with. Jumorrow, thank you for posting this up for the Sunshine Health, that individuals can look at some of the classes that they have dealt with. Then we also have it here where we're having Alex Jordan talking about document for accountability. And this goes on both sides, because sometimes I've seen it where good cops are out there doing their jobs, and because we're public servants, we don't go out there and wave our own flags about everything that we do that's outstanding. But I will tell you, all of the good cops out here, you need to be documenting the work that you're doing. How are you documenting yours? Are you having your things put in your file? Are people writing letters and notifying the chief just as they would bad cops? Because what happens, sometimes you'll have it to where two individuals will go in for a lateral move or for a promotion. And sometimes, because the good cop doesn't have things documented and the community didn't report what the bad cop was doing, the bad cop would get promoted because of our lack of documentation. So what I want it to be is, all of you all that are out there in the community, if you all know that there's some good cops, when is the last time that you let their chief, their sheriff, their city manager know that they were an outstanding cop, so that therefore you can get them into position and leadership to be dealing with all of the other cops that are out there? Because leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And when you start rewarding that you want, more people will start doing that. We need to really take a look at that one. Make sure you're recognizing what they do. Oh, I guess that goes to where I should read stuff before I put it up there, huh, Chalk? You'll say this: Greg is always giving me just credit when he talks about his career. When I was asked by Greg about Leo, I was honest with him. He asked about Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale, and I was working at Hollywood. I told Greg you would have a better career at FLPD, and I guess I was correct. It's an honor to help guide a fellow good brother and homeboy from Louisiana into the field and to go up the ladder, but always reaching back to help others. As I say, Zimblish, you know me for years. My whole thing is, if I can help somebody as I pass along the way, my living will not be in vain. And I greatly appreciate your continued counsel and want you to continue traveling light. And we have been on here for a little longer than we normally have, but I believe this discussion was very much needed. I want to remind us that a bad cop is a good cop's worst enemy. If you're out there and you're dealing with an encounter with a law enforcement officer, I want you to comply with whatever they ask you to do out there on the street. That is not the time to debate, argue, resist out there on the street. I want you to go home the same way that you left, and we can deal with any of the other issues, dealing with it, internal affairs, legally, or any other way when you have made it to safety. Also, I need you to let the departments know if there are things that are going on. I want you to engage more with the police department. I want you to partner more with the police department. Remember, community-oriented policing, that's dealing with partnerships. Partnerships are a two-way street. We need to both be reaching towards each other, the community, the police department, and our educational system. Working in that triangle, we can get anything done. Then I want you to come over there with the community policing academies. Get engaged with us. If you want to find out what's going on with law enforcement in the state of Florida, you can go to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, Criminal Justice and Standards Commission. You can see what's going on there. You can also Google the Department of Justice and see what's going on out there. I also want you to look for individuals in your community that will be outstanding officers. Recommend them to be law enforcement officers. We need more good cops in our profession. Let's get on out there and do that. I see a couple more things coming up. Captain Gaddy, I appreciate you for joining in. That's Captain Gaddy. He's up there in Durham Police Department. So we got these things going on. So I want to tell you all again, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like, comment, share this video. If you thought it was something that others could benefit from, share it. Let's get together, put things together. If there's something that you think I should discuss, drop it in the chat, DM me, reach out to me so that we can have these discussions. I'm also looking at bringing some individuals on so we can have some discussions about success, leadership, careers, because our goal is to help our community move forward. This bridge between law enforcement and community, it has to happen. So let's remember, when you're going out there, a bad cop is a good cop's worst enemy. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you all for participating. And I am Dr. Gregory A. Salters, and you all have been seasoned for success.